this is like some major ploy from the committee that like, okay, let's make Bama's schedule look tougher here down the stretch. So it's like, see, they knocked off a top 10 team, on the road. Yes, conspiracy. I got my tinfoil hat on right now. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into Monkey Knife Fight's college football preview show, week 10 edition. I'm Dan Watkins. Joining me, of course, as always, is the great John McKechnie of Rotowire.com. John, we made it. Breathe it in. Soak it in. It's chaos month, my friend. How are you doing?
November. It's time. There's a chill in the air, and we've got the first set of college football playoff rankings, and we have a couple of insane matchups this weekend. And the beauty of it, especially when they announced the kickoff times a couple weeks ago, is that we get Georgia-Tennessee mid-afternoon Eastern time, and that bleeds right into LSU-Bama. Like, it's football nirvana. It doesn't get much better than that. I understand people that are like, too much SEC emphasis and all that. Well, those are far and away the best games this weekend, and some of the best teams in the country going at it in crazy environments. What's not to love? I'm so excited for this weekend.
Absolutely. I cannot wait. We have those two SEC matchups that you mentioned. We're going to break those down for you guys on this show this week. But also we have Clemson at Notre Dame. How are the Tigers going to look coming off that bye? Who's their quarterback going to be? We don't know yet as we head into the weekend. The Irish, can they fully embrace that role of being the spoiler this month? They have two top 10 teams on their schedule, with Clemson coming to South Bend this weekend. And at the end of the month, they take that trip out to Southern California. And as you mentioned too, John, the first committee rankings are out for the college football playoff. Everybody's doing their classic overreaction on Twitter and on TV. But are there some teams that are now playing with a chip on their shoulder, like Michigan, who, if the season ended today, would not be in the playoff? Or TCU, who's undefeated in the Big 12, and now they're screaming, SEC bias. Why are we number 7? Why are we behind Bama? But I thought we would start off with this before we get into the committee and the playoff rankings. I have a little bit of a conundrum Saturday night that I was hoping maybe you could help me figure it out and get through this.
Who better to ask than this guy? This guy's got it all figured out.
Who better to ask? I mean, who knows? By the time this happens, you could be, I don't know, just shut off from the world if there's a big upset in Athens. But still, I got to ask you. I've been invited to a Miami-Florida State watch party Saturday night. I got a good friend that's a Miami alum, good friend that's a Florida State alum. They're throwing this big party. I'm wondering what do I do here? I mean, obviously I'm going to show up, but I don't want to be late. But this also, runs in with what could be the end of a fantastic game between Georgia and Tennessee. I don't want to be driving during that time. Also, this, the Miami Florida State game might be the fourth best game in that window, third best game in that window, right? You got Bama-LSU, Notre Dame, Clemson, Texas, or no, what is it? TCU and Kansas State, or no, yeah, Texas and Kansas State. So, I mean, do I be that guy and bring a second TV? I mean, what do I do here? Do I show up? At what point do I safely ask, okay, can we switch over to the Bama-LSU game?
So bringing your own gear, I think, would be an aggressive play. Like that's guy who watches game during wedding ceremony on his phone to another degree. So you don't want to insult the hosts. So I would say go ahead, and I'm always in favor of, for parties, social events, being a little fashionably late. And I think that you can certainly justify that in this particular instance with Georgia and Tennessee. And you have the added luxury of a little bit of flexibility here. If the game seems to be relatively in hand one way or the other, then you can just go and no harm, no foul. They don't even know that you were thinking about being late to this party. But if it is close, you got ways around it. And it's always a good thing to jump into a party after things have kind of kicked off a little bit. So I think that you're in good shape. It is a conundrum. I'm not saying it's not minimizing it by any means, but I think that my play would be watch the game in full and then get on over to the party, because experiencing it on the radio, as someone who experienced the kick six on the radio driving back to school, you don't want to miss seeing it.
Right, right. And then, so at what point during this Miami Florida State game, which Miami's down to their third string quarterback. Florida State, they're kind of teetering, could be going downhill. Miami just played a game that was what, 8-6 or something like that.
It was 14-12 with no touchdowns.
14-12 with no touchdowns. At what point, especially if I'm checking my phone and this Bama LSU game is living up to the hype, can I go? Can we maybe flip over?
I think you can nudge them in that direction. Absolutely. And I think, Florida State and Miami fans proud of their respective programs, but I think at this point, reality is set in for both of them enough to where they know that LSU Bama is the better game. I know this is billed as a Miami FSU watch party, but I think FSU kind of puts this one away fairly early, and that might be better for the vibes of the entire party to just turn it off if it turns into a bloodbath. I kind of feel like Florida State's figuring things out a little bit. I know it was just Georgia Tech that they played last week, but they looked pretty good. They've got some pretty serious talent. Johnny Wilson, the mix of Trey Benson. They might get Treshaun Ward back. Lawrence Toafili. There's some dudes on FSU. Miami. That's looking rough though.
Yeah. All right. Well, very good. So let's move on. Let's talk about this, the first ranking scout from the committee. What's your biggest gripe, biggest takeaway? Who should be the angriest fan base in the country right now?
I hate how predictable it was that TCU was going to get jobbed, right? I mean, that was written in the stars. It was known that Alabama was going to get the committee respect over TCU, despite the fact that I believe Texas is the only 3-loss school to be ranked in the top 25. And without them, does Alabama even have a top 25 win this year? I don't believe they do. So the resume for Bama just really isn't all that impressive. And I understand that Bama has built up the cachet over a decade of plus of dominance, that they're going to get respect, even if the strength of record isn't all that crazy, anything like that. But TCU, there's nothing more that they could have done to this point in the season to earn the respect of the committee, and they're undefeated, and yet they still check in at number 7. And it frankly, it wouldn't have shocked me if they put Oregon over TCU in the rankings. If anything, like that, there's a little bit of a silver lining there, a modicum of respect from the committee towards the Horned Frogs and the Hypnotoads with that particular setup. And then Clemson, Michigan, that it's kind of a coin flip for me. They both have so many key games here down the stretch, and Clemson probably has the slightly more impressive resume than Michigan. Michigan basically played an NFL preseason schedule to start the year. They were literally just kind of like figuring out their quarterback situation in season. Clemson has had a much tougher road. So I understand giving them the lean at 4, but I think that the general consensus from people is that Clemson is trending towards being that sacrificial lamb in the playoff, which the number 4 seed often tends to be. And it's weird to see Clemson in that particular spot. We're used to seeing, like last year, Cincinnati, or, no offense, but Notre Dame has been in that spot a couple of times. Clemson's kind of trending there right now. If they keep things on the rails and go undefeated, it very powerful Florida State 2014 vibes.
Yeah, I think the Michigan schedule makers in the AD department up there are probably looking at their schedules coming up the next couple of years, be like, you know what, maybe we should not go with 3 cupcakes in the month of September. Maybe we should put someone, semi-respectable in that first month for their schedule. The big thing I took away is how is LSU number 10? All I can think of is that this is like some major ploy from the committee that okay, let's make Bama's schedule look tougher here down the stretch. So it's like, see, they knocked off a top 10 team, on the road. Yes, conspiracy. I got my tinfoil hat on right now. I just don't get LSU being number 10. We'll get into this matchup in a little bit, but I just don't see how the Tigers are up that high.
I think that right now, LSU is probably the 10th best team in the country, but at the same time, resume-wise, you see them being ranked right next to Ole Miss. They beat Ole Miss. They beat them handily. So it's like, okay, I understand that. But Ole Miss's resume, usually or generally better than what LSU's is. UCLA, I think, would have an argument. K-State, they've had some impressive wins here, and they've gotten things done even without Adrian Martinez. So, they really put it to OK State last week with Will Howard at quarterback. So I think that performance-wise and how the rest of the year is going to go, I think that it's understandable that LSU is, kind of viewed that way, but I don't think that they've earned that spot necessarily right now relative to some of those other teams that I just mentioned.
Well, we will find out on Saturday if they belong or not. And before we get into these matchups and these contests here on Monkey Knife Fight, one more thing we got to talk about here to start off the show, and it wouldn't be a week during the 2022 college football season without a coach being fired. Brian Harsin, he is out at Auburn. So, John, who's next up for Auburn? Who's the next coach?
Well, Auburn is so weird, and I do a radio spot with these guys in Ruston, Louisiana, every Tuesday. And one of the hosts is an Auburn guy, and they always ask me to characterize what Auburn really is as a program, and it's kind of distilled into this: it's a terrible, great job, because you get the SEC prestige, you get the recruiting base of the Deep South. You're right on the Georgia-Alabama border. You're in the state of Alabama, but your crossover game every year is Georgia. You have to play the entire SEC West, including Alabama, every single year. It's just such a brutal haul that they have to navigate every single year. And they have the classic problem of too many cooks in the kitchen when it comes to their boosters. They operate in a very strange way there at Auburn. So it causes friction. It causes burnout for those coaches. Someone posed the question on Twitter after Steve Nash got fired. I think it was Kevin Clark of The Ringer. He said, what job would you prefer to have? For 3 years, you can't quit no matter what. Would you rather deal with being the Nets coach or Auburn's coach for 3 years of your life? And it's like, oh man, give me the Nets, I guess, because Auburn is they have such a way of grading down on their coaches. Even when Gus Malzahn was doing well, they all wanted him to be fired, like basically every year other than 2017. But who's next? I think Matt Rule would make a little bit of sense. It's not a sexy hire, especially after the way things went at the NFL level, but I don't grade college coaches too hard for failing at the NFL level. It's a totally different thing. It's misguided to think that most of these college guys can handle the NFL the same way, but they need someone that can build, and Rule can do that. Rule can absolutely do that. I mean, he brought Baylor essentially back from the dead. He made Temple relevant. I think that would be a shrewd hire. Again, not as sexy. I know that they're going to want to poach Lane Kiffin or Hugh Freeze, who just signed a massive extension at Liberty, but I think Rule is kind of where this goes. I think Auburn often goes for like those pie in the sky type of candidates, and they fall short because of those factors that I mentioned. But I think settling and still getting that Rule would be good.
Yeah, so you're not going to fall for the Lane Kiffin or the Deion Sanders hype train that seems to be taking over Twitter right now. Everybody, I mean, I saw a rumor this morning that Coach Prime was flying into Atlanta so he could drive to Auburn. Because he'd be flying Coach into Atlanta from Jackson, because I'm sure that's his style and what Auburn would do to try to court one of the hottest coaching candidates in the country. But anyways, let's move on. Let's dive into these contests this weekend. We got Tennessee at Georgia. It's a 3:30 kickoff on CBS. Our friends at Ballybet have this line at Georgia, -8, 8-point favorites for the Dogs. The over-under at 66.5, John. This game is also, I saw this is the most expensive get-in ticket in college football regular season history. I think TickPick has it at $6.25 get in the door price. Absolutely absurd. So I'll be watching this game on TV. I'm not coming down to join you in Georgia and go over to that one. I don't know if you're going or not, but I think the committee has a clear message to the Dogs this weekend, is that they have to win and they need to knock off Tennessee here. But I'm going to ask you, who needs this one more?
I think Georgia does, because they don't have Alabama on their regular season schedule, and as we know, Tennessee already dispatched of the Tide a few weeks back at the beginning or the middle of October. So I think Georgia doesn't really have the other marquee potential wins the rest of the way. Even, Kentucky's kind of fallen by the wayside, of course. Miss State has done the same. So this is the last big shot that Georgia really gets at notching a marquee victory. And obviously, if they lose this game and Tennessee continues to run the table as we all expect, then Georgia's not going to be able to play in Atlanta and get the chance to win the SEC. So they absolutely need to. Whereas I think Tennessee, I don't know if they quite have the cachet that the Tide did a couple of years ago when they didn't play in the SEC championship, but still got into the playoff. I think that there's at least a case, and they obviously have a ton of respect from the committee with them being the number one team right now. So I think Georgia needs it more.
Are you concerned at all about the jinx of the initial 3 seed? John, are you aware of this? That
Go on.
The team that is ranked number 3 in the first playoff committee ranking of the year, only one time has that team actually made the playoff, and that was the 2020 Clemson Tigers. So are you concerned at all?
Yeah, that's troubling. I'm troubled by this, Dan.
All right, very good. And how troubling is the loss of Nolan Smith for the Bulldog?
That's big because Georgia's obviously been able to recruit very well, but we knew after last year there'd be some reloading on defense, and Nolan Smith was kind of like a steadying veteran presence on what was otherwise going to be a kind of retooled front seven. So the drop off from Nolan Smith to I love the guy, but Chaz Chambliss, not what you want. It's not exactly like if Bama were to lose Will Anderson and then DJ Dallas, or DJ Turner or Dallas Turner, comes in. Like they don't have that kind of edge depth. So that's a concern when you need to get Hendon Hooker on the ground.
All right, very good. So we got Stetson Bennett. His more or less number on Monkey Knife Fight is 300.5 passing yards. He's reached 301 through the air in 3 of 8 games this season. And that Tennessee pass defense, we've talked about this quite a bit this season, 127th in the nation. They're giving up just over 300 yards per game. So can Bennett get to that number this week?
I think he does, but it's not really because, how do I put this? He gets to that number. It's not because of Tennessee's pass defense specifically. It's because the way that Georgia's going to have to play. Like Stetson Bennett only completed 19 passes last week, but it went for over 300 yards. And obviously there were the kind of fluky play to Brock Bowers that did some of the heavy lifting there, of course. But basically my thesis on this game is that Tennessee is going to be able to get what they want on offense, and Georgia's going to have to match the score. And, eventually, like the first half, they're going to try to run the ball, try to get that established, try to keep Tennessee off the sideline. But Tennessee is so quick strike that they are going to be putting up points, and Georgia's going to need to match it somehow. So I think for better, for worse, I think it actually is for worse if Stetson Bennett clears this number for Georgia. But I think that's kind of how I see this game unfolding. So give me more.
I think that's how a lot of people see this game unfolding. As we mentioned, the over-under for this is 66 in this game. So they're expecting a lot of points to put on the board. You got Hendon Hooker on the other side, Tennessee's quarterback. Same number, 300.5 passing yards. He's thrown for 301 or more in 3 of 8 games. But he really hasn't had to throw as much the last 2 weeks since that Bama game, both kind of blowout wins. Georgia allowing just 177 yards per game through the air, but they just allowed Anthony Richardson to throw for 271 on them last week. Last season, Tennessee threw for 332 against Georgia as a team. 244 of those yards belonged to Hooker. And another little fact here going into this one, nobody, not named Bryce Young, has been able to throw for 300 on this defense in the past year and a half. So can Hooker change that on Saturday?
I think he will. I think the Tennessee, again, the big plays were part of their offense last year, but now it's obviously even more so. And I think it's encouraging that Cedric Tillman came back last week, didn't do a whole lot, but I think getting his feet under him for one game before coming back or playing in this game, I think is really big. Jalen Hyatt has been just an assassin basically out there at the other receiver spot. And they have good depth too. I mean, Brew McCoy is a stud, 4 or 5 star. They're going to be pushing the ball deep down the field. I think that Georgia has some concerns at safety. Maybe the tight end gets a little bit more involved this week for Tennessee's offense. And I think Keely Ringo, as notable as he is for the pick six and the natty last year, he's someone that takes a lot of gambles. And if he loses one of those gambles against one of those Tennessee receivers, it's going to the house. It's going for 6, and it's going a long way along the way. So give me more for Hooker.
Yeah, I like the more on both quarterbacks here in this one as well. Give us the shootout. We want it. Anyways, can't have a shootout without weapons, and we got 2 great ones here this week. Let's start off with Brock Bowers, the big tight end for Georgia, 75.5 receiving yards. He's only reached 76 yards in 2 games this season. But in those 2 games, he has been an absolute monster, going way over, including last week when he had 154 yards against Florida. Are we in store for another monster game from Brock Bowers this weekend?
Need it. AD Mitchell, his injury kind of really limits what Georgia has in the passing game, especially deep down the field. Bowers for tight end can actually really get down the field as we saw last week. So give me the more for Bowers. I think we see, what could end up being his most busy day of the season. I don't know if it gets much better than what he did last week against Florida, but I think yardage wise, more.
And then on the other side, you got Tennessee's stud receiver, Jalen Hyatt, 75.5 receiving yards is his more or less. He's reached more than 75 yards in 4 of 8 games this season, including each of the last 3 games. Cedric Tillman returning last week, John, as you mentioned, did not take away from his target share at all. Hyatt is on another level right now. His last 3 games, these are his totals: 18 catches, 519 yards, and 9 touchdowns. So can Georgia slow this guy down at all?
Not to the extent where he's going less than 75.5 yards. I'll say that much. If they keep him under 100 with just 1 touchdown, I honestly think that's a win for Georgia. He is just on another level right now. The way that he fits in this offense, the way that Heupel's using him, his connection with Hendon Hooker, all that good stuff. It's going to be a bear to slow him down, let alone stop him on Saturday.
So it seems like we're in agreement. We're just hammering the more on everything in this game Saturday.
Give it to us. It better deliver.
All right. I hope so. That Bama-Tennessee game delivered. Hopefully this one does as well. But prediction time. That line is Georgia favored by 8. What's your prediction, John?
Tennessee covers, and I wouldn't even mind if I was not a Georgia person, sprinkling a toad on the old money line there for Tennessee. I think they could win.
Plus 240. That could be a nice little payout. I like the Vols as well. I'm going to go Tennessee 38, Georgia 35 in a thriller.
A good old heartbreaker, even better. I can't decide if it'd be worse to just get rinsed by them or to lose like that. Either way, I think things are not going to be great for your boy on Saturday night.
All right. Well, thoughts and prayers to you. We're all rooting for you, John. Let's move on. Let's talk about the other big SEC matchup. We got Alabama at LSU. It's a 7:30 kick. Bama on Bally Bet is favored by 13 points. The over-under is 56. Brian Kelly this week, talking to the media, says that facing Alabama is why he came to LSU. He better be asking the football gods in whatever stupid accent he wants to come up with to just give him all the help he possibly can get Saturday night. I'm all over Alabama in this one. I think Nick Saban, they're pissed. They want to make a statement, and I think they're going to just absolutely mop up LSU and Baton Rouge Saturday night. But let's see how you feel, and let's start off with Bryce Young, 290.5 passing yards. He's reached 291 yards in just 2 of 7 games. LSU's giving up about 204 yards per game through the air, and only one quarterback has thrown for more than 290 on them this season. It's not Hendon Hooker. It would be Robbie Ashburn of Auburn. So can Bryce Young get to 291 on Saturday?
I'm going to say no. I think that Bama wins this one comfortably, like you said, but I think that Bama's passing game, I know they're coming off the bye and everything, but it's missing a bit of the Jimmies and Joes that we've gotten accustomed to seeing there. They don't have the Jamison Williams and John Mechie combo. They don't have the Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle combo. So Young will have a nice, efficient game, but I think that the ground game just kind of carries the day for Bama here. And like you said, Bama really is the only team that consistently beats LSU in Tiger Stadium. I'm looking to see that again this week, but we'll get to our picks momentarily, I'm sure.
All right. On the other side, Jaden Daniels, 210.5 passing yards. He's hit the more on this number in 4 of 8 games, including each of the last 3. Bama's giving up 211 yards per game, so right at that number. Feels like this game's going to be set up for him to throw, John. So can he get to 211 Saturday night?
That's what I'm thinking too. It's game script dependent, and I think with LSU likely being trailing for a lot of this one, is maybe even by a lot. We're going to see Daniels kind of have to turn it loose. So I'm going with the more.
I like that as well. I think this just sets up for that. And then we'll move on. We got a couple nice little skill position players we got to talk about. Let's start off with Jahmyr Gibbs, 94.5 rushing yards. He's reached 95 on the ground in 3 of 8 games. LSU is pretty average against the run, allowing 142 yards per game. John, you thought this is going to set up nicely for a Bama run game. So what do you think about Gibbs?
Yes, I absolutely do. And Jace McClellan is a really nice, combination back along with Gibbs so that they can kind of mix and match throughout this game. But I do believe that Gibbs is he's someone that can get you more than halfway to this number on one run. I think that we're going to see him really featured here. I'm taking more on Gibbs 94.5.
And his fantasy point prop is 20.5.
Yeah, touchdown plus some catches. Yeah, I'm going more there too.
All right, very good. Lastly, we'll talk about Kayshon Boutte. 50.5 receiving yards, 51 or more receiving yards in just one of 7 games this season. It's been just not great for our guy this year after a lot of hype going into this season for him. But are we going to get a big game Boutte call in Baton Rouge Saturday night?
You can't spell Boutte without out. I'm out on this guy. Give me less. He's not doing it. He's not getting it done.
All right, very good. Okay, prediction time. Bama favored by 13. I'm all over this. I think they win by 3 touchdowns. How about you?
Yeah, they're going to crush LSU. I think this is going to be a resounding win for the Tide. I think that LSU again overall is turn things around, but Bama's just not the team to really. I don't think they're going to be able to prove it emphatically against Alabama. To put it lightly, I think they'll probably not lose again the rest of this season, but this one's going to hurt.
All right, very good. Moving on, let's finish up with a little speed round here. Let's start off with Illinois' stud running back Chase Brown against Michigan State. 135.5 rushing yards is his more or less. He hasn't had a game yet this season under 100. But what do we see out of him this week?
It's really tempting to go with more because Michigan State is such a freaking mess right now. I'm going to go less, though. I feel queasy about it, but I'm going less.
I think he's got like 100 total carries the last 3 weeks combined. They're just like definition of a workhorse.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right, moving on. Wake Forest's quarterback Sam Hartman at NC State, 290.5 passing yards, more or less.
Wake had a meltdown last week, so I'm a little rattled about the Deeks. But 290.5, they don't have much of a run game. The only thing that can really prevent him, I don't think the turnovers are going to be there the same way that they were a week ago. But NC State can really slow this game down, limit those possessions for Wake. But even still, I'm going to go with more.
All right, let's head out west. And finally, after what feels like it's been a month since we've had like a ranked team in that late 10 o'clock Eastern window, we got 2 of them this week. Let's start off with USC. They're at Cal, or no, they're home against Cal. Caleb Williams, 300.5 passing yards, more or less.
Give me less. Cal has a way of just kind of making games a little bit ugly, a little bit uncomfortable. Even that they play with results that are kind of like more than the sum of their talent. But I think that they're going to be able to keep a lid on USC's passing game. I'd be more worried about Travis Dye if I were the Bears.
And then on the other side, you got Jake the Snake's son. That would be Jack Plummer at USC, 250.5, more or less.
USC they have a weird defense where they do a lot of gambles. They create a lot of turnovers. They give up a lot of yards. This could be a setup to where Plummer hits the more just if they're playing from behind. So I'll go with more here.
All right, very good. And then finally, let's wrap things up with DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, UCLA's quarterback. They are at Arizona State, 255.5 passing yards, more or less.
I'm going to go with less. I think DTR has a good game here, but he's a guy that just gets it done in so many different ways that we might not see him cross this number. We get Jake Bobo going, but really not a whole lot else going in that passing game. So give me less.
All right, very good. Anything else to look forward to this weekend, or is it just all eyes on the SEC?
All eyes are on the SEC this weekend, which I can feel that many eyes rolling as a result of this. But I am interested. We always talk, potential upsets. This wouldn't be a big upset, but I think Clemson is firmly on upset watch. I know you're a Notre Dame pessimist by nature. I understand that, but they go into Syracuse last week, do what they do, starting to get some things going, running the ball well. I think Notre Dame definitely could come out ahead on this one, just like we saw a couple of years ago in DJU's coming out party that really poisoned our brains for the better part of a year into thinking that he was actually good.
Yeah, that line is like, it's got me thrown because it's 3.5. And like, I think Notre Dame's going to put up a fight in this game. I think Clemson's going to sneak out of there with a win, but I don't know if it's like 3.5 is just such an evil number because I think it could be a field goal game. But I wanted Brandon Joseph, by the way, tweet of the week last week. He took Sean Tucker's pleased and was like, "I'm very pleased with the outcome at the Carrier Dome." He had that big pick six to start off the game, but it was a good one there. Yeah, I think that's the third best game of the weekend, right? That should be on your second TV when you're watching that 7 o'clock, 7:30 window. But yeah, I mean, maybe the Irish do show up here, as I've mentioned before. I think they rise for these big games and then they like overlook the mediocre opponents. So maybe Navy will take them down next week. But yeah, the Irish are going to hang in there Saturday night.
Okay, all right, we're feeling it. I got a buddy down here. It's a big Notre Dame fan. He is en route to South Bend as we speak. You know, it's going to be a fun, raucous environment there. And yeah, I feel like Clemson, they just don't have the playmakers that we're used to seeing from them. So this game is going to be close.
All right, very good. That's going to do it for us this week, guys. Don't forget to hit subscribe on our YouTube page at Monkey Knife Fight. Thanks for watching and good luck on your contest this week.